Quite simply, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss may have the most dangerous personnel in the entire SEC when it comes to the passing game. The receivers, the tight ends, the combination of everything that Lane Kiffin returned and also acquired this offseason is simply an embarrassment of riches, and we're going to get into it here today on SEC Unfiltered. Hello, everyone. I'm Blayne Gilmer. Welcome into SEC Unfiltered. Make sure you're following us on all the socials there that you see listed below. You've got X or Twitter, you got Facebook, you've got TikTok, you've got here on the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But we're going to be talking here about Lane Kiffin and that Ole Miss offense this year. Listen, Lane Kiffin, make no mistake about it, when he's been most successful, it has been running the football, being able to have the ability to be very, very balanced, but also be a run-first team. Okay, when he had Quinshad Judkins and Ulysses Bentley last year, a 1-2 punch over the last couple of years, it's been predominantly, plus the legs of Jackson Dart, it's been predominantly run over the pass. Okay, an average of 58% run, 41.2 run attempts per game versus 30 pass attempts per game. So you can see that when Ole Miss is rolling, and they were rolling last year, 11-2, Peach Bowl victory, all that kind of stuff, the running game is kind of what really gets them going. And in the games that they struggled to run the football, okay, Alabama, Georgia, they struggled to really move it and get things going offensively. So the question is this year, does that change in terms of philosophy based on the great personnel that Lane Kiffin has? When it comes down to it, guys, I think you've got to look at Lane Kiffin and as a coach that is going to be able to adapt, of course, to the people around him. We saw what he did at Alabama, high-flying offenses, things of that nature, looked almost more like basketball on grass, type deal that he had with those talented receivers. And he was really solely responsible for kind of evolving Nick Saban in Alabama out of the offense that they had prior. So when it comes down to it, I think you got to look here at what Ole Miss is not only returning, but the players they brought in and say, hey, does this become more of a, okay, at least 50-50 instead of 58, 42, or is this going to be a deal where, hey, you might even see Ole Miss be pass first? And I think that'll have a lot to do with the growth and maturity of Jackson Dart, how much Lane Kiffin now with his third year being the starter for Ole Miss, being able to come in and handle even more of the concepts, more of the offense, do more at the line of scrimmage, things of that nature. But let's get into some of these receivers that they are either bringing back or they have brought in. Trey Harris, quite simply, was amazing the first game that he had the ball, okay, against Mercer. He goes in there, he's scoring touchdowns seemingly every play that he gets the ball, and then he gets hurt, doesn't come back fully for a couple of weeks, things of that nature, loses his, ability to have a couple of games there where he could have stacked up even more numbers, finished right under 1,000 yards, easily would have blown past that, 1,200, 1,300, something along those lines if he had been healthy. But I think this may have been the move of the offseason very quietly for Ole Miss. I know they get a lot of credit for bringing in Walter Nolan on the defensive side, bringing in, Chris Paul on the defensive side from Arkansas, bringing in a lot of guys via the transfer portal, okay? But I think that Trey Harris returning, his retention to the program, him and Jackson Dart together, is going to be huge. QB1, wide receiver 1, this guy is a bona fide star, okay? He's big enough, he can go up and high point the ball, win 50-50 balls. He's fast enough to break away, and he has really, really good hands. I think Trey Harris is a guy that is going to be a superstar. He could have went to the NFL this year, but elected to come back, and I think he's going to be very, very productive for Ole Miss, and a guy that him alone, he is going to skew how the defense plays. Always, okay, do we have to have a safety over the top? How do we need to, defend the short area there? Are we going to play cover 2? Are we going to play quarters? All this kind of stuff. Are they going to mix match coverage based on patterns and stuff like that? With Trey Harris, all these different things that you have to take into account with the number one receiver. And I think he is that true number one receiver there for Ole Miss. And then they return Old Faithful here in Jordan Watkins. Okay, guy had 741 yards last year. He's reliable. He works that slot, gets a lot of receptions, is a talented punt returner as well. I think that's a big deal for Ole Miss having Jordan Watkins back in terms of leadership, in terms of culture, in terms of just being a playmaker in key situations. Okay, I think it's a security blanket type guy when you have that slot guy that can work the middle of the field, work the option routes, and then also catch the big play and be a boost on special teams. That's huge for Ole Miss there, and huge for Lane Kiffin to have kind of a glue guy in that offense there for Ole Miss. Then they bring in one of the additions, and Juice Wells, man. Juice Wells is a guy that really got South Carolina fans riled up because they thought that, hey, paid him all this NIL money and things like that to their understanding, and then he bolts and leaves for Ole Miss, a guy that had 928 yards in the 2022 season for South Carolina, was hurt, and some people question, was he hurt the whole time? Was he not? Whatever. I think he'll be healthy when he arrives in Oxford, and I think he'll be excited, motivated to play for Ole Miss. Again, the Grove Collective doing a great job being able to acquire this kind of talent. Really a guy that if you look across other SEC teams, you could drop Juice Wells in there and he would be the wide receiver one for that team. But with Trey Harris, now he becomes a tremendous like 1B, maybe wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1B to Trey Harris's 1A. And when it comes down to it, that is a dynamic duo. You got a guy who's a bigger receiver that can, win the 50-50 balls, like I said, and Trey Harris that can go down the field, get those back shoulder throws, all that kind of stuff. And then a guy in Juice Wells who is just absolutely electric after the catch, does a great job of separating at the top of a route. You can use him in the screen game. There's a lot of stuff that Lane Kiffin's going to have at his disposal in the pass game with Juice Wells here being available to him as a weapon that they've brought into Ole Miss. Then the tight end position, Kaden Prescor, guy that came over from Memphis. He struggled with some injury stuff early, tried to come back for that Alabama game, wasn't really, full go. But as the season went on, you saw Kaden Prescor getting better and better. He had a big catch in that Georgia game. Even though Ole Miss didn't have success overall, he had a big catch in that Georgia game. And then later in the year against Penn State in the Peach Bowl, you saw 136 yards, 2 touchdowns for Kaden Prescor, and a guy that looked like in that game that, hey, when it comes around to 2024 and you start playing those games, your Ole Miss, this is a guy that should be on the Mackey Award watch list because he he's a big guy. He's not, I wouldn't say he's got the athleticism of like a Brock Bowers that we saw at Georgia or something along that line, but he's a guy that has a knack for being able to find grass, get open, and he simply catches the ball when it's thrown to him, and he can make stuff happen afterwards. So a big body guy. He's good enough in the run game in terms of a blocker that you have to, account that, hey, if he's lined up in the box, he's not just something where he's going to slide out in the flat or things of that nature. He can help out in the run game to be an extra hat there blocking for Ole Miss. But his strength, I think, is when you're able to utilize play action or slip him out down the seam or down the sideline on a wheel, maybe get him out on a little arrow route on an RPO, something along those lines, and he can do something with it after he catches that ball. I think Ole Miss has a very talented tight end, number one there. And then they add depth at the position in Dion Wright from Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, he had 366 yards receiving last year, 208 before that. So not eye-popping numbers, but it also wasn't a very elite offense that he was playing at under Brent Pry over there in Virginia Tech. He's a guy 6'4", 230 pounds. He should be able to be a compliment to Kaden Prescor and provide depth there because, like we said, Prescor had some injury stuff last year. You always need a guy that can be able to step in when needed, and Dion Wright gives that depth that you need. Our friend Dave Shoemate, who does some stuff here at SEC Unfiltered. He said, hey, it's not always your top 22 players, right? 11 on offense, 11 on defense that makes the difference. Sometimes it's the top 44. It's not who has the best 22, it's who has the best 44, who has that key depth that they're able to put in there and not miss a beat. And I think Daquan Wright brings Ole Miss a step closer to doing that, particularly at the tight end position. That's big personnel wise, allows you to go 12 personnel if you want to, one back, two tight ends, be able to do some different things formationally, and kind of just get the defense moved in different ways. So having a couple of weapons right there at the tight end position, big deal. We've seen what different teams have done with that. We've seen when Arkansas had two good tight ends. We've seen when Georgia, of course, most recently has had a bunch of good tight ends that they can do things with. Alabama's had that situation before. When you have good tight ends and multiple of them, you can do a lot of different things there, personnel wise and formationally. And then Dion Smith, he started out at LSU as a freshman, had to go the JUCO route, ends up now at Ole Miss. He's an electrifying guy. He's a guy who can really just he can be sprinkled in just enough by Lane Kiffin that people say, okay, we have to be aware when Dion Smith is on the field because he can be a instant playmaker, a guy that goes and can put 6 on the board in a hurry. I think with all those other big names, with Wells, with Harris, with Prescor in there, with all of these receivers, with the Watkins, he's going to be a guy that is going to get to come in, learn from some of those guys, develop, hone his craft. But then you're going to see plenty of times this year, I think, isolated events where Dion Smith makes a big play for Ole Miss. And I think it just adds to what Lane Kiffin has there in front of him and what he's able to do. Listen, I'm not saying that, Ulysses Bentley's not going to have a big year. I'm not saying Logan Diggs, providing that he's okay from an injury standpoint, isn't going to come in and help Ulysses Bentley be a good 1-2 punch, kind of a lightning and then thunder punch, if you will, instead of thunder and lightning. But I think ultimately the strength of this team are the pass catchers, are the wide receivers and tight ends, and Jackson Dart's ability. Now, I do think Jackson Dart could possibly run the ball a little bit more, especially given that you got, Walker Howard there as a backup, kind of waiting, ready to go, and some other talented young guys that are there in that room. They trust Jackson Dart to be able to run the ball and also protect himself while doing it. Now, he isn't the smartest with it all the time. Sometimes Lane Kiffin would want him to get down and not take some of those hits that he does at times. But I think as a passer, this is the NFL year. This is the contract year, so to speak, for Jackson Dart. He's got to show that development as a passer, and I think he'll work very, very hard this offseason as he did. He made the jump from year 1 to year 2 at Ole Miss. I think he'll make the same kind of jump from year 2 to year 3. And with all of those weapons there, it's going to be hard to deny him. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to SEC Unfiltered, the best SEC entity on the internet. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications when we go live. We're going live on Saturday night as this is dropped on Thursday. So make sure that you are subscribed to all those good things, and we'll be back next time to talk more Ole Miss, more college football, more SEC football right here on the best SEC entity on the internet, SEC Unfiltered.